The war in Ukraine is spiraling as Kiev launches long-range missiles at Russia with Biden's approval, dragging NATO closer to the edge. With Turkish President Erdogan warning of nuclear risks, can President-elect Trump step in and stop the slide into global chaos? I'll unpack it all right here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Are we on the brink of World War III? U.S. President Joe Biden's green light for Ukraine to use long-range missiles is testing Vladimir Putin's red lines. Red lines that the Russian leader now says will be backed by a new nuclear doctrine. Is Biden, with just 2 months left in office, gambling with the world's security in hopes that Putin's bluffing? After the U.S. go-ahead, Ukraine swiftly struck targets deep inside Russia. Putin responded with what he said is a new type of missile that the U.S. is powerless to stop. He also doubled down with a threat to attack any country arming Ukraine against Russia. The exchange comes as Moscow lowered its nuclear threshold. Turkish President Erdogan blamed Biden, saying his U.S. counterpart is fueling the conflict. He warned that NATO must now prepare for Russia's next moves. Are we on the edge of a global conflict, or will cooler heads prevail? And for more, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is foreign policy analyst Rich Utsin. From Ankara, former Turkish diplomat Gülru Gezer, and from Moscow, Sergey Karaganov, an advisor for the Russian government. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Very pressing issues at hand right now. We have Trump coming in, Biden leaving, major decisions being taken. Rich, I want to start with you. A recent decision taken by U.S. President Joe Biden, about 8 weeks left on his mandate. Was this decision stepping beyond the boundaries with an incoming administration not so far away, and especially after the American people voted overwhelmingly in favor of Trump, and where his policy and his campaign was centered around peace?
Well, it's good to be with you. In the strict sense, no, it's not overstepping bounds. The president is the president until the transfer of power on January 20th. One can question the strategic logic or the political logic, but in formal terms and legal terms, he's within his rights to do so. From my perspective, the logic for doing this should not be viewed just from the perspective of Washington, but the fact that Moscow has called upon its North Korean allies to send 10,000 or more troops to try to help retake Kursk, at the same time that it's continuing to try to take more Ukrainian territory in Donetsk and Luhansk. So I think what this is a counter-escalation, if anything, rather than an escalation. Some people would portray it as an escalation, but of course we're in the midst of a long escalatory cycle started by the aggressive war that Putin launched in Ukraine. So if anything, I would blame the Biden administration for doing this too late. I think striking the forces that are attacking into Ukraine and gathering to do so would have been appropriate probably a year or two ago. Better late than never.
Gülru, you've worked as a diplomat in the U.S., in Brussels, and in Russia. So you have a good understanding of what the Russians, the Americans, and the Europeans are thinking. You see Turkish President Erdogan, and he seems very, very concerned when we look at his very recent statements saying NATO needs to prepare, but this is also unprecedented escalation. How do you view Turkey's position, and what does President Erdogan hope to come out of this recent round of escalation?
Well, of course, we're all concerned as a country living in the region, and the turmoil directly affecting us. And I think the president was right in saying that NATO should also be prepared, because if you consider the fact that when a statement comes out of Russia, and I'll let, of course, Sergey elaborate on that, they're serious. I mean, their actions later on, at a time that they find appropriate, support their rhetoric. And I fail to understand the reasoning why Biden did this so late, and whether if it would really create any gains for Ukraine. Politically and diplomatically, I don't see any gains if you're not trying to maximize your gains before sitting at the negotiating table. But from a military perspective, we understand that allowing Ukraine to hit targets within Russia with these missiles won't really change much on the ground. Okay, I understand, as Rich said, they're trying to keep their hold on the territory that they got in Kursk, and they will use it as a bargaining chip when eventually they will start negotiating. But all of these steps only they create a greater tension in the region, and we're not really sure whether if Trump will be able to deliver his promises. I mean, everyone is expecting Trump to, somehow find peace, not in a matter of 24 hours. I don't think that's realistic at all, but in a short period of time. What if that doesn't happen? Then what's going to happen? I think the reason why President Erdogan and all of us are concerned is that things might spiral out of control.
Sergey, you know the Russian president well. You advise him. It seems like the Americans are under the impression that Vladimir Putin is bluffing. Is he bluffing, or is he about to go all in with his hand and just call the Americans on this escalation?
Of course, I think that Russian president and Russia has waited for too long, hoping that our enemies would come to senses. But they did not come. And Biden is an insane idiot of war, people around himself. He is trying to prolong and to provoke a new round of war, which is criminal, because he threw in hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die just for the sake of keeping United States semblance of a hegemonic power. Poor Ukrainians are dying by hundreds of thousands, probably already by millions, but that wouldn't save the United States. Hopefully, next president will have and his entourage will have a little bit more sense. Otherwise, they will suffer dearly, and of course, Ukraine would be crushed. The regime of Ukraine will be crushed. They will capitulate, and then I hope now we could reach a kind of an agreement. Whereas truly historically Russian areas will come back to Russia, and what is left on the Ukrainian territory will be completely demilitarized. I would even devise a no-flight zone.
Rich, you have a strong understanding of the U.S. military and U.S. diplomacy. You have a lot of experience there. You've been in closed-door meetings. When Trump comes and he's made these promises on the campaign trail that he's going to bring peace, he even said in one day. Now, obviously, that's campaign talk. Peace isn't going to come in one day, but he's going to start the process, it seems. What is he going to have to work with? I mean, he wasn't expecting this, obviously, when he made those promises. It seems that a lot is crumbling before he takes over. Is he going to be able to deliver?
Well, we'll see. He's a deal maker. He's also a man who echoes many of Ronald Reagan's approaches to geopolitics, particularly with the Russians, which is engage and talk, but believe in peace through strength. So listening to Sergey, it brought back some reminiscences. I was old enough to observe just at the end of the Cold War, and some of the fabulous and rather creative statements one heard out of Moscow back then have their echoes now in this fantastical thinking that somehow Russia's on the cusp of victory and is going to wipe out Ukraine and take back and restore its glory. Look, that's not going to happen. The war's not going well for Russia. And I think it's also, as Sergey rightly points out, extremely costly to the Ukrainian people. Donald Trump's whole position on this has been, at this point, not a lot's changing and a lot of people are dying. So there's got to be something that meets minimums for both sides. He'll try to find that. That's the kind of deal that he'll do. But I would like Sergey and the rest of our friends in Russia to realize he's not going to do that by asking Ukraine to roll over flat on its back. That's not happening. There's a coalition war going on right now. Iran is now the arsenal of Russia, North Korea is now the personnel pool for Russia. If the war was going great for Russia, I don't think they'd be doing those things. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to see Trump engage much more personally and much more directly with Putin and with the Russians. He wants to talk. He wants to find a deal. But it's going to be by recognizing that this aggressive war launched with coalition is not going to end in a victory for Russia. It's going to end, and it's just going to end.
Okay. Guru, President Erdogan was one of the few heads of state that actually wanted to engage in diplomacy with the Russians over almost the past 3 years. Viktor Orban in Hungary, Xi Jinping in China. But besides that, generally the West has ruled out diplomacy. Now Trump is coming. Can you see Erdogan and Trump working together for peace, or is this something that Trump is going to take on by himself? Will Trump need a supporting cast of leaders like Orban and Erdogan?
I think there's a huge opportunity here. Yes, Trump likes to do things his way, but I think he also needs regional actors as well to enforce a peace plan and to somehow convince the sides to sit at the table. And Turkey has enjoyed good relations with Russia since the beginning of the war. We've never stopped our contacts. On the contrary, actually, I mean, of course, Sergey could also comment about this, but I still believe that Turkey is the only actor in the region that can be considered as an honest broker vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia. And I think the Trump administration will see this and work with regional partners. So I think there is a huge opportunity there.
Sergey, the general understanding is Trump's going to come. He's going to try to broker peace. But obviously, when he made those promises, as I stated with Rich, the field, the realities are different than what they are now. They could change even more in 8 weeks. Is the Russian president thinking, I should hold off until Trump comes back? Or are there certain lines that once that threshold is crossed, even if it means eliminating the chance for peace, that Russia will respond quite possibly with a nuclear response?
First of all, I mean, Trump or no Trump, there is a zero trust in our American former partners, now enemies. And of course, no zero trust in terms of our relations with Europeans. They have lied, they have betrayed. So the only way to talk to them is to hit them hard. But hopefully, my advice to my government would be to arrange an American withdrawal from this war with flying banners. I do not want the United States to experience a Weimar syndrome. I hope the United States would come to its senses. There are some signs, but very early signs that it is coming to its senses. As to our European neighbors, they have a history of multiple genocides, unleashing 2 world wars. They are the worst place in the human history. They should be sidelined forever, hopefully, without direct military means. We have shown already that we are ready to re-escalate. We have waited for too long. Just yesterday, we showed what we could do. This time it was a medium-range missile with hypersonic multiple warheads, hitting a military plant in Ukraine and destroying it. But that could be done if the West continues. That could be done with our Western neighbors who support Kiev and junta. Then other steps over the ladder of escalation will come if the West or United States respond by conventional, then they will get nuclear response. And but I hope that Americans at least could come to their senses and understand that they have gone too far, and that their stakes are smaller than to risk direct hits on American territory. And a few weeks ago, an important American talked to me. Now, by the way, Americans are forbidden to talk to Russians, but he dared. And he said, what if the United States attack Russia with nuclear weapons? And I said, okay, there will be a retaliation, a limited retaliation, and then we shall wait, buy popcorn and wait what Americans with their very low tolerance those sacrifices and with the 250 million weapons on their hands will do to their elite. I do not want America to suffer that. So I hope that our American partner, now enemies, but partners, will retreat in peace and occupy a very important position, hopefully, over years, one of the four great countries which will lead the world towards a more peaceful and balanced peace order. As for Europeans, they should be sidelined for a while.
Rich, Sergey said America went too far. Now, there's U.S. long-range missiles in Ukraine operated by U.S. personnel. Has the U.S. now entered the war? Is this not just a Ukraine-Russia war, but the U.S. is now a direct actor operating, supplying, giving the commands, basically? Is it now a U.S.-Russia war also?
No, not yet. And hopefully it won't become that. That would be very bad for the Russians. We've seen the very poor performance of their air defense systems. And frankly, I don't think they'd like what would be coming if they chose, as Sergey sort of hinted at, to go after U.S. territory or U.S. targets. It would be a very different sort of thing. This is kind of still a hybrid war. It's primarily a Russian offensive war against parts of Ukraine, but it's become a coalition war too, as I was referring to earlier. The fact that Russia does not produce enough of its own military equipment, but has to rely on China, North Korea, and Iran and its coalition effort is matched by the fact that Ukraine, as a smaller country, has to rely largely on imports of sophisticated weapons, although they've done a great job of developing their own UAVs and other tactical systems. This is not yet a direct NATO-Russia war, nor is it a direct U.S.-Russia war. I think that President Erdogan's right. I think NATO has to be prepared for that. I think if you listen to Sergey's comments, you'll hear the ever-growing hint of menace and the idea that, yes, we need to neutralize Europe into cowering in their corner and never saying a peep about what Russia's activities are in its near areas. We need to get the United States to put its tail between its legs and leave Central Europe. I know that I haven't heard Sergey say this, but there are other Russians who have said that it won't stop with Ukraine, that the Baltics, that the former Warsaw Pact members and so forth need to come home to Mother Russia as well. Look, that's not going to happen, Sergey. That's not the world we live in. And neither President Trump nor any U.S. president will allow independent countries to be removed from the map. Now, an honorable peace, something that meets minimums for both, because Russia has legitimate concerns. And I think President Trump understands that. Most serious strategic thinkers in the United States think that. There is what negotiators call a ZOPA, a zone of potential agreement, and we'll explain that. But look, sitting here and talking about we will strike you, we will go nuclear, you might as well take your shoe off and bang on the rostrum like Khrushchev back in 60 or 61. That's not going to work. We're going to have a serious adult conversation about the limits of Russia's offensive war, how it comes to an end, and what is a more stable arrangement in this area moving forward. And I guarantee you it's not going to be with Russia receiving half of Ukraine and the rest being isolated and a no-fly zone.
Gudru, it seems that the Americans are continuing to apply pressure. Putin has redrawn his red lines in a much more sensitive way that could be triggered very easily. European countries could be considered legitimate targets. What does Turkey do if Article 5 is triggered?
Well, first of all, I just want to say something. I have an American panelist on my right and a Russian panelist on my left, and their statements are already causing a little bit of chills on my spine. But I mean, hopefully things will turn out in a much better way. But of course, Turkey is a NATO member. So if Article 5, I mean, if somehow NATO is involved, then Turkey will be obliged to take part in the role that is given to it. But of course, that's why we've been trying to avoid the prolonging of this war for so long, because we have good relations with Russia. We think that it's important to engage with Russia. We have good relations with Ukraine. Yes, we support their territorial integrity and sovereignty. And we also want to find, as Rich said, an honorable peace that is mutually acceptable for the sides, the warring parties. And we've been trying to avoid the situation from, the war from expanding. But of course, countries have, I mean, Europe and the US they have different views. I mean, countries that have been a part of the former Soviet Union, like the Baltic countries, see an imminent threat from Russia because of historical reasons. Countries that were part of the former Warsaw Pact also have a different perception of the war. And Western countries, Western European countries have a different perception. And the more, let's say, east towards Russia you go, the more you understand the seriousness of the situation. But what we're trying to do, what Turkey has been trying to do from the beginning, is to avoid an escalation that would involve the direct participation of NATO in the war.
Okay. Sergey, how much pressure is there on Vladimir Putin from more hardline elements inside of Moscow to respond even harder? Is there a lot of pressure? And also, what's it going to take for Russia to say, okay, deal, let's end this war?
I think the pressure is overwhelming, and President Putin understands that a piecemeal solution wouldn't solve the problem. However, the problem is two-pronged. One is to win the war in Ukraine over the West, not over Ukraine. The West has to be defeated. Second, and thus the Third World War could be avoided, starting again as always in Europe, and our European neighbors, not all neighbors, of course. Turkey is not that European. Our mothers, they are trying to repeat the scenario which they have started done in 1812 and then in 1949, and then of course they start in 1914. They will be defeated as always. However, of course, we want to avoid to the extent possible unnecessary repercussions in terms of death of innocent people. That's why President Putin said that if and when we use weapons against NATO countries, we will call on all people of goodwill and Russian-speaking people to withdraw from areas where military installation and decision-making centers are located. I do not want this war to escalate further, but especially to the nuclear field. But I understand that we have a problem, and that is the world is sliding towards a series of wars because of the rapidly changing balance of power, and because of the desperate attack or counterattack of the West, and now in Europe and elsewhere. We have to stop that desperate counterattack before it deteriorates into a Third World War. And that's why I think it is an obligation of Russia to stop it, even by using ultimate means. As to the fifth chapter of NATO treaty. I'm a historian of NATO. I hope that our NATO our neighbors understand that they will not be protected by American nuclear arms. Never. And that means that if they start a war against Russia, that will be a nuclear war on the territory of these countries. And I beg Almighty and our neighbors to avoid that.
Rich, it seems that the bare minimum that Russia will expect in any type of peace deal is no NATO for Ukraine. How adamant is the U.S. and how adamant are other NATO allies about expanding into Ukraine, especially if it's such a provocative topic for the Russians? Is that something that the Americans and other NATO allies could sign off on and say, okay, no more expansion eastward?
Well, there's a division of opinion among NATO countries about that. There are some, obviously, the policy is no expansion of NATO during the war, because that would essentially create the conditions of war between NATO and Russia, which we're not anxious to do. On the other hand, there are many people who think that Ukraine should be offered a path. There has been an open door policy to NATO that ultimately countries that want to join need to join. But I think this is going to be one of the issues that needs to be examined in terms of the peace negotiations. But if you listen to what Sergey's saying, we see a series of wars coming because the shifting balance of power as the West declines is what he was saying. And the West is engaged in a counterattack, a desperate counterattack to keep that from happening. So follow that logic out, playing that logic out. It's clear that what Sergey and others like him in Moscow are thinking is we're going to fight. We're going to launch wars as we see fit. We're going to rearrange the map and engage in geopolitical gambits, and the West can do nothing about it. And if you do something about it, we're going to escalate as high as we need to because we want to avoid the ultimate situation of a total war, but we'll go nuclear if we have to. There are so many mutual contradictions within that line of reasoning that the only thing that clearly emerges from it is aggressive intent. So I think the whole issue about whether Ukraine is in NATO or out of NATO should probably be postponed. In any case, that's going to be something that gets discussed during the negotiations. But one has to doubt the sincerity of intent to even engage in negotiations if one plays out Sergey's logic here. So this argues that the Trump administration should adopt, as Reagan would have, a very robust deterrent policy as a prerequisite for serious negotiations. And then we'll see what comes of it, because the just get out, have them roll over on their back, if that's what Russia wants, that's not going to be the formula for negotiations.
Yudra, I want to give Sergey the right to respond because Rich directly addressed him. I don't think it's fair if I just close it out right now. Sergey, closing thoughts on what Rich said?
I have been for years calling on my government to increase reliance on nuclear deterrence and to change our nuclear doctrine, and also to change our nuclear policies and go up the ladder of escalation. I'm happy that my government started to do that. And the end game is to have peace in Europe, or else finish this war by victory over NATO. But I do not want that, because many innocent people, especially children, will die. And I am a Russian, and we are humanists. But NATO is a criminal, aggressive alliance which have started by raping Yugoslavia in 1999, continued, most of their countries continued in Iraq, then in Libya. And it should be rolled away. That is our maximum task, going to the back to the 1997. We could initiate NATO borders. We could negotiate and compromise, maybe keeping NATO countries in the political NATO while withdrawing military infrastructure from our borders. We saw the crawling of military infrastructure towards Russian borders as an aggression. I am really critical of my government with that we have tolerated that so far. We, in a way, we are also to be blamed for our weakness, for our trust, for our readiness to accommodate. Now that is finished. NATO should withdraw, at least its military machine. If they start a war, that will be the end of European nations.
Rich, Guru, Sergey, I think the content of your comments just show how serious the situation is, and thank you for having this discussion with me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.